Next panel discussion. I would like to call on stage the moderator for our panel discussion, Ms. Arpita Sen. She is a senior director and legal counsel who joined Qualcomm in December 2012 to set up and manage the legal and compliance function of Qualcomm in India. In the past, Arpita has played the role of a general counsel, having expertise in corporate and commercial law, joint ventures, mergers and acquisitions, venture capital, insurance, employment, licensing and IP, property documentation, etc. Arpita's previous assignments include QK Digital Media, AOL, ING Vaishya, Life Insurance, Mindtree, Biocon, and she also has hands-on experience as a lawyer with Mullah & Mullah and Craigie Blunt & Caro. Please put your hands together to welcome Ms. Sen.
Good afternoon. I hope you've all had a good cup of tea or coffee and can stay awake during a fairly routine discussion on what we call compliance. So I hope that we'll be able to prick your mind and get you stimulated enough and awake after a good lunch. And I think they served some snacks as well now, so you might be feeling quite sleepy. So today's panel discussion on compliance is looking to cover the topic of conquer corporate compliance and become the diligent enforcer. On my panel, I'd like to welcome Dr. Akhil Prasad. He's the country counsel for Boeing International. Dr. Akhil Prasad is the country counsel and he's also the company secretary of Boeing International Corporation. And he heads the function and he's based out of New Delhi. The rest of his profile is in the books with you, so I'm not going to go into a deep dive into his introduction. Welcome, Akhil. The next person on our panel is Mr. P. Mani. Mr. P. Mani is the Vice President and Chief Compliance Officer of Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. Mr. Mani is actually finance-based, and he has taken on a new role in the compliance function, and he has all the stuff that is needed by a general counsel, essentially working with the finance section, and so he has the integrated aspect of finance and legal. So I welcome Mr. Mani to the panel. Our third panelist today is Bhamini Vishwanath. She is the Director Legal and Company Secretary, Lenovo India, and she also is the Regional Ethics and Compliance Council Asia Pacific for Lenovo. Please welcome Bhamini. So welcome everyone. Today's discussion on compliance. We're going to keep this as more of an interactive session, so please don't wait till the end to ask your questions. Feel free to ask anytime and stop us in the middle of our discussion. To start this discussion off, I think the first question that comes to mind is, what is compliance? So I'm going to ask each of the three panelists to give us their views on what the word compliance means to them. Does it mean FCPA? Does it mean the UK Bribery Act? Does it mean the Prevention of Corruption Act? Does it mean statutory compliance? Does it mean ethics and values? Does it mean a way of life or a culture of an organization? So what does the word compliance mean to each of the panelists in the organization and in the vast experience that each one of them comes with?
Okay, so thank you, Arpita. Compliance to me means that any action, whether it's legal, regulatory, which can put your company and directors to a great risk, risk, whether it could be risk, financial risk, whether it could be financial sanctions, whether it could be criminal sanctions. A compliance officer now needs to have a very broad mindset in terms of what should be a compliance program. And the reason is the new Companies Act. It makes the company secretary responsible for complying with all laws. And there have been a lot of changes under the new law, which requires that each company needs to have a risk management process. And risk management process has not been defined. So which leaves it very, very open to each company to devise its own compliance and a risk management program. And the third important piece of a compliance program is applicability of foreign laws. Because these days we are working on it's a globalized world. Companies are working across different territories, different jurisdictions. So we have FCPA, which is applicable to all American subsidiaries. Then, last year, 2 years ago, we had a new law to prevent sexual harassment at workplace. To me, that is a very important thing. Another thing which is normally asked at different forums is what keeps you awake at night? GC, what troubles you most? Dawn raids trouble me most. I don't want to get a call late at night or early in the morning that regulators are in office, income tax raids, they land into your office. So whether your finance team or your tax team has been geared up, whether they have their own checklists to ensure compliance, I think it's a mix of everything. What regulators, what is the risk that comes on you? And there can be no clear-cut checklist to monitor that. So all of us have to think through and manage and devise our own list. It's not only my own role, but I have to discuss this with all important people in the organization, whether it's sales, marketing, finance, HR, administration. We all have to sit together to formulate that list.
Just to add on to what you said, I think the answer, am I audible? Yeah, the answer was there in the question itself. Because you said, what is compliance? Does it include FCPA? Does it include ethics? I heard you say that. Does it include regulations and law? So it includes all of that. So that's the short answer. But I like the way you put it. I think the one is the scope, and the second is the plan, and the third is the outcome and the monitoring phase. So these are the three elements, if I can box it up in that way. Scope is pretty much all the things which was there are part of the question itself, all international laws that one is normally applicable to. That itself is tough. To find out how many laws you're applicable to and you need to comply with, it's a challenge in itself. The second piece is the policies of the company. Many times that is missed. So while the individual responsibility can rest with the quality function or an assurance function, HR function, but at a very high level, I think compliance is also compliance to the policies of the company. Hiring policy, recruitment, are you taking the right kind of guys, and do you treat the people well? Are you firing them for things you should not be? Do you have a proper exit policy? Do you meet the employees when they leave the company? Do you have an exit interview? I can go on and on. And the third piece is the ethics piece, which is not to stand on a fourth floor of a building and say we are honest, but to actually do everything to prove that you are honest, which is have a code, a written code, ensure that the code is followed, and preach what we call internally as the right way to do things. So actually we sum up compliance in our company as the right way to do things. We don't even go to such a long answer. We just say it's what is the right way to do is what is that we preach. So I think the third part is still developing, in my view, in India. Companies in US, because of the whistleblowing law and the very draconian under SOX there's a law, right, which mandates, which requires a person to whistleblow in case there is an unlawful activity. So because of that, it was a little more, the incentive to whistleblowers, etc., made it, Dodd-Frank Act, made it more lucrative and therefore made the companies more active in that area. In India, that is happening, but it's a matter of time. So it's very imperative on the organization to ensure that the code is preached, people are trained on it, and people are told to be honest. It's not easy, To be honest is not easy. Someone said it very well, I think, in the earlier speech, that when something is, or I think it was you who said during the breakout area, if something is paid, if a 500 rupee bill, voucher, or something is paid to a government official for an entertainment, one thing is whether you should do that or not. But the worst is after doing, you record that as something else. That is the worst part. That is worse than actually incurring that spend. Incurring that spend, in my view, is okay. It's corporate hospitality. So that part of ethics is what I think needs a lot of preaching.
Hey, thanks, Dr. Akhil and Mani. Arpita, I think you started off with a very right question in terms of what is compliance. Is it FCPA? Is it ethics? Is it culture of the company? And I think both Akhil as well as Mani said it's all of the above, right? And I'm not going to say anything different from that. But when I started my career, maybe about 15, 20 years back, all these maybe were just not there. It would be more of regulatory and statutory compliance, which would be part of a finance function. People would look at what needs to be done, whether we do it or not do it, or how do we manage not doing it, was the way of life then. From there to now, I think we've come a very, very long way. So it's just not about regulatory compliance. Regulatory compliance has become a part of the compliance system. It's much larger than that. One is the regulatory or the statutory compliances. You have the FCPAs, the ethics and compliance. I still remember my first conversation with the ethics and compliance officer who was in the US. She says it's just not regulatory, it's business compliance. What is it that you do right? How do you do it right? How do you ensure that your business partners, your suppliers are also doing it right? So it's sort of an end-to-end program which has to be inculcated within the DNA of the organization. And as Mani said, it's not easy. It's just not easy, and all the more difficult if you have the tag of a compliance officer who is sort of responsible for it. But the compliance means that it has to be something which is a part and parcel of each of the individuals, not only those general counsel sitting in this room, but across every individual in an organization.
Yeah, just to add to that last part, if I can, I think that's a very interesting point. So I come from finance, right? So everybody in the company need not be an SAP expert, correct? So for example, a sales guy, he need not know how to record a sales invoice. But just taking on from the last line, but in compliance, it's the other way around. The people who are actually doing the activities need to do that more than me, actually. And we, as compliance officers, GCs, are at best, from a process point of view, aggregators of non-compliances. The knowledge of compliance and what to do right should actually rest there, unlike other functions where the domain basically drives what needs to be done. Like an accounting function or HR function. Everybody doesn't know how to take an interview, how to recruit. HR knows best. But here it's the other way around. It's a sales guy going to meet a doctor. He needs to know what is the right way, what are the things you need to do right, what are the things which are allowed. What if you do wrong, you can be wrapped by, by the pharma code. So that's a very subtle difference between compliance and other functions.
I agree on that, Mani. Just to go back to what Akhil said in terms of checklists, just to throw the question open to the audience here, I'm sure each one of you have a checklist, right, in terms of compliance, or don't we have, right? So it's not something, it's a starting point, and I think Akhil made the right thing. All of us have a checklist, but from there it evolves. It's something which each of the stakeholders is responsible, the function is responsible for what they need to do. But checklist definitely helps. At least I started off that, and then it got on to a different league altogether.
Now, adding to the checklist part, all of us have a checklist, but in Fidelity, I was the general counsel, and we have, Bangalore especially, you have all these cab operators, and cab operators, they do not have valid GPS system installed. The driver antecedent check verification is not proper. We have had incident of, rape being committed by these cab operators. Then the vendor due diligence, when we are getting in, whether we are getting in the right vendor to be our trade partner, whether we are screening our employees, whether the HR, the resumes that we get, the background verification of employees, these were never a part of my checklist. But as a GC of the company, I thought there is a great risk if the general counsel of the company is not involved in such issues. So as a general counsel of the company, I dived into that, all these important risks. And then we set up a process in place so that, we have a command center that when a female employee is dropped at home late at night, she has to send a message, to the command center. And if she doesn't send that message, an email has to go to her and her manager that, you did not respond at night. The point being, the control function, the general counsel's role is not only to interpret the law and prepare a list what the law requires, but all these issues, which could have a great reputation risk on the organization. Like, for example, setting up of sexual harassment committee. This is a very serious thing. And, we do not want to have a situation that when a crime is committed, we do not have a committee in place. We should, and it's not only about setting up a committee, it is also about training the committee what they need to do. It's also about formulating a policy, and that policy should be functional. Yeah. So all these things have to be done as a part of the compliance process.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all three of you for your...
Talked about the compliance into statutory compliance, security compliance. But there's also one more thing, which is compliance under statutory, the contractual obligations. Like, you have vendors, you have investors sitting in your homes, you have a lot of obligations. Though there is no criminal liability at the directors, there is a liability, financial liability at the company. I think that's also equally important.
I think that's a very good observation, and I think it's very good input. So coming back to the question at hand, what does each one of us think constitutes the word compliance? And I think as general counsels and people who look after the robustness of a business, the word compliance should mean what is the risk that you need to identify, if not mitigated, would affect that business so much that it cannot run. So I think once you take that as a base point, it would cover almost every aspect. And therefore, the general counsel's role is to look at whether they're a subsidiary of a UK company, a US company, the laws that apply to them, Sarbanes-Oxley listing, your own internal policies was one that Mr. Mani mentioned, contractual obligations, vendor selection. Does your vendor actually make you liable? Well, if it's a Contract Labor Regulation Act vendor, then you become a principal employer and you're liable for everything that he's supposed to do. So I think we all are in agreement that the word compliance really is not describable. What it does mean is that where you are in the business that you are in, you need to understand that business and identify the core statutes, the core provisions that apply to you, and come up with a program that works for your organization. And so it's all of the above, including a way of life, ethics, and a cultural
stance,
nuance, which comes from the organization that you work in. So any other questions on the first aspect of this panel discussion?
Yeah.
She's got a question.
Yeah, hi. I just have a few observations to make. Compliance to me, I think the way it is treated, at least in most of the Indian companies, is, well, there is one checklist. Well, it looks like a black box. There's people really do not know how much of it is applicable, not applicable, whatever. We have to follow it, right? At the end of the day, we have to follow it. Otherwise, the directors may get notices, or the store or the factory might get closed down and things like that. But in my view, I think the right way, or I think the ideal way, would be to embed it in the very system itself, in terms of even when they established a business, like when they have their checklist. If you're setting up a store or you're setting up a particular business, don't you look at the raw materials? Don't you look at the production? Don't you look at the machinery, the people, and all of that? So that is when it has to come in there itself, in terms of what should be complied. So that
You're absolutely right. So compliance.
So that's when it becomes meaningful, and also to say that we are a compliance-driven company. As long as the list stays separately in the cabin of the general counsel or the legal team, and it's looked upon as something that needs to be complied at the end of the day, well, I think the spirit is lost.
Absolutely.
No, absolutely. And we are going to cover this topic in the next 2-3 questions. So I think it's a good observation. a checklist is a checklist is a checklist, and it does not serve the purpose unless it is prepared for that business and is ingrained within the organization to actually follow it. I think we are all pretty clear that one person designated as a compliance officer cannot ensure compliance within an organization. So we will come to more of these questions, and we'll seek more of your observations as we go along. I think we'll move on to our second question, unless anybody else has any observations or questions on the meaning of compliance. Okay, thank you. So I'd like to ask this panel, when you run a compliance program within your organization, do you differentiate, or do you think there's a difference between who is responsible and who is accountable? I think some of this we've already addressed in the previous question, but very quickly, answers from each one of you.
So can I take that? Yeah. So pretty much compliance is the responsibility of all employees. Okay, I think I really like the question you asked. I believe that apart from the hotline, which is a redressal mechanism, and the policy and training evangelization, I don't think compliance needs to exist without these two. And that's a statement I've made in many places. I think it's a self-killing function. If the processes, right things are embedded, I think your question was absolutely spot on. I think other than, of course, there are certain things where we need to play a role for sure. Like what are the changes which are happening? I'm talking from a pharma industry. Say in FDA, over the years you would have also read a lot of reports on FDA audits and how things have not gone well for many Indian companies. So definitely there is a role for us to go and tell, hey, it is not enough to produce a quality drug. It is not enough to have a clean dining table. You need to have a clean kitchen as well. So this is a phrase which we use very often, which is to say that your processes have to be spick and span. The end product can be good by chance also. Accidentally it can also be good. So this is a new area which people may not be aware, with the best of intent. So evangelizing that, what is data integrity, preaching them that. Another good example I can give you on the responsibility, this accountability is marketing code. By the way, there is another problem in our country. We always sway between extremes. Either you do everything or you don't do anything. So when the marketing code cloud started circling above our heads, one thing we did is the knee-jerk reaction, sab kar rahe hum log karenge, some voices within the company. The other is please define what is to be done. Okay, same is the case with anti-bribery. There is a notion within the company that even if a government officer comes to your office in 42-degree heat, somehow you can't extend a courtesy car to him to drop him back to his office. It's bullshit. It's wrong. You can do that. So we should not go to this other extreme. So that's where the framework, the evangelization, that's pretty much the role of compliance. The rest of it, I think, 100% complying with all rules. It's 100% role of all the employees embedded in the function and the processes. And at best, a scorecard can be kept and can be shared. I think nothing more than that should be done by a chief compliance officer. I know you're using the word GC very often, but I would say chief compliance officer. I am that would need to do very, very long and the short of it.
So, Mani, I would actually look at walking the talk is a very important aspect. Yeah. And you rightly talked about responsibility versus accountability, and we talked about how it needs to be the culture, the DNA of a company for compliance to be successful. If the top management does not believe in walking the talk, I don't think that's something which is going to be, there's no question of, yes, they are responsible, but then, it becomes a question of who's accountable there. So I think finally, or the most important thing is it needs to be top driven. That culture has to set in from the management. Walking the talk is going to be very important. And then, of course, checklist is always a starting point for each of the function, each of the stakeholders. And then the compliance officer, the directors, become the overseeing authority who finally are answerable to the regulators. I would look at it as something which goes hand in hand, and it's not something which you can actually differentiate between responsibility and accountability.
So in terms of accountability, the directors, the KMP or the company secretary under the law they are the accountable executives. But in terms of responsibility, what each company should do is do a proper delegation of authority. We should identify what are the broad areas of that the compliance function should cover. And each functional head, whether it's sales, marketing, HR, admin, legal, these, by way of a board resolution, these people should be authorized and be made responsible for each of their respective functions. Further, we should not rely on a compliance certificate culture. The compliance certificate culture will only hold good if it is backed up by an auditable file. So each function will have to do, the checklist will be provided to these functional responsible individuals. They are supposed to do or take help of the compliance team to do the checklist and create document backup. Under the new law, under the new Companies Act, it is now mandatory to have an internal auditor. It should be as a part of the charter of the internal auditor to do a review of the compliance process, go through the audit files, check whether each functions have done or not done their respective job in terms of backing up the audit file, back up to the compliance certificate, and then report to the audit committee or to the board of directors whether in essence a compliance has been done by the people who are responsible for compliance, so that tomorrow at least the directors or the KMPs or the company secretary have that comfort and not a sleepless night that tomorrow if something falls, at least we have documentary evidence to support. So, it's a live case, because when I was with Fidelity, we had a raid from the Provident Fund authorities. The Provident Fund authorities asked us about the PF details of our employees. And when we went to the HR department, they said, we do all the filings, we have everything. I said, okay, please give us the details. So they provided us details of the employees who were full-time employees of the company. But the PF authorities said that employees include contract staff. So where is the information of 1,500 contract staff that your company has employed? Have you collected the Provident Fund details? Have you collected the ESI details? Have the labor welfare fund been deposited? It was a big question mark. We did not have anything. So then we told the regulator, we said, we were upfront that for our full-time employees, we have all information, but for contract staff, we will at least require 3 months to collect the data. We are quite sure that our vendors are tier 1 vendors. We have done a good due diligence on them. They would be maintaining the record. The only thing is the record is not available with us. So we went back to our vendors, we collected all information, and by the way, we were asked for a suitcase, that if you don't provide the documents, please give us a suitcase. So we said we don't believe in suitcase culture, and we require 3 months time, we will provide you with all the documents. So initially they imposed an assessment on us that the Provident Fund liability based at 25.61%, which is the PF and ESI included, is about $4 million. They said that this is the kind of penalty we will impose on you if in 3 months' time you don't provide us this information of your contract staff. We said, just give us 3 months. In 3 months, we provided them with all the information, and the fine that we had to ultimately pay was just 90,000 rupees. So that is the strength of a true compliance department, that you are able to protect the interest of the company, minimize the financial risk. The regulator will try to impose more penalties on you, but if your paperwork is strong, if your team is strong, and you have done a thorough work, you are, giving your directors a lot of comfort.
Absolutely.
Great. So I think to sum up, compliance is everyone's responsibility. A few small snippets that I've learned from my bosses and superiors who have been teaching compliance over many, many years is catch it small, deal with it big. So if it's small and you look into it when it's small, you will always be able to find the right way to assess it, the right way to look after it. And if you ignore it and you're ignorant about it, you push it under the table and it becomes big, that's when the risk increases. So I think two small takeaways from here. We'll move on to the next question. Next question for this panel, which is, what can we do as organizations with good legal and financial controls to take away the perception of corruption? What can we do to strengthen the fact that so many companies are investing so much in compliance and have good, strong compliance teams, and therefore are able to move away from this concept that unless you toe the line, you won't be able to get your work done?
So I think we all are ambassadors of compliance to our respective management. We have to, we are legal people, we are dealing with business people. We have to give a proper business justification to them that why a cost is justifiable. What I normally do is, I say that if you do not have a compliance program, and if we get into some kind of an investigation or a litigation, the value of non-compliance, that one investigation, if it goes to court, and if you were to fight it out from lower court to a superior court to the apex court, the cost of litigation, will be many times the cost of setting up of a compliance department. The second thing which I tell them, that is the cost benefit analysis. The second thing which I tell them is, if you don't do this compliance department, most of the labor regulations in this country, all of the labor regulations in this country have a criminal prosecution of directors. So if you violate labor laws, directors will go to jail. And Companies Act, the penalties have magnified. The imprisonments have gone up, the financial fines have gone up, and this applies to almost every regulation. So this is how I justify that, how and why we should do a proper investment in the compliance team.
So just to add on to what you are saying, so what you are saying basically is the stringent regulations and laws are actually helping the compliance team, frame a very, or providing a valid justification. The fear factor of imprisonment or huge penalty. In fact, I had some figures on, just carried with me, I didn't really know this will come up. So between 2010 and 2014, $30 billion have been paid as settlements. They're not final fine, they're settlements, okay? Which means these amounts have been followed up by a detailed what is that? Confidentiality, integrity agreement, corporate integrity agreement, which says that, hey, we are going to remediate our processes. However, because there have been some lacuna or loopholes and some errors have crept in, some wrong payments have gone, we are agreeing to pay this much money. That amount is $31 billion, okay? Within 3 years, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, depending on the terms of the CIA, the regulator is going to come back and check whether you have actually done everything which you have promised, and the CIA is signed by the CEO of the company. So that goes back to the point he's making, the buck stops only there. He's signing a corporate integrity agreement saying that I vow to set my house in order. So that's the, so thankfully the regulator is putting pressure, especially DOJ is kind of helping us. Little sad that it should happen that way, but I guess that's life. On the other hand, I also believe that the value part has to be also tutored and evangelized. I'm a great believer that if you tell a person to do something, as a rule, he may do it because someone is watching, but he may not know why he is doing it. He may not really get the essence behind it. If you tell him, hey, you can give a gift to a vendor of a box of sweets of 100 rupees, but you can't give him a box of sweets in a box made of gold, because it can be construed as a bribe, and if someone talks about it in a breakout area, you will be embarrassed. If someone reports, you will be embarrassed. So he has to be made aware of the value behind certain things which he should not be doing. I think that evangelization is an ongoing process, and to my mind, and in fact I manage the hotline, and I get complaints from across the globe. Many of the complaints come where actually employees say, I have noticed this thing happening, I saw this training material, and in fact most of them are on the data integrity part, the quality in the lab. hey, you did say about this, I noticed one document which was dated back by a day. I've received complaints like that. No bad intent. You know, someone in a hurry forgot to sign, he comes back and signs the next day. People are reporting that. So that kind of awareness has to be, you know, continually done. But I agree, I mean, this is a top-down approach, you know, the fear and the fact that the board is answerable. And we have a very strong Indian board. We have one of the best board-managed company in India. And I have seen the tone changing in the board meeting, in the audit committee meetings over the last couple of years. And how, especially with Companies Act, you know, the point you made, how they are actually asking us, the IFC, internal financial controls, the risk assessment you talked about, they are actually asking a documentation which has on the left-hand side all the processes in the company, which is mapped to the organization chart so that we don't miss any. So there is an org chart and everybody is doing something, so there is a process. And then what exactly in a COSO manner, I hope everybody is aware of COSO, which is, you know, the 5 components of internal control. You have a control environment, you have a risk assessment, you have control activities, you have monitoring activities, and you have information, how you disseminate information. They are actually asking us to show for every process what you have, the structure you have in place. So it's happening. Yeah, sorry. You want to.
Sure, thanks. So just, I know there's been a lot of discussions around it. From the question that I understood, Arpita, we talked about what is the perception of corruption, right? So starting from there, and of course in terms of the investing in compliance was the next subject that Akhil and Mani talked about, and also in terms of creating awareness around it. I think when it comes to perception of corruption, I think that's a reality. I think there is a perception that India is, especially when people want to invest in business in India, they do believe that India is a corrupt country and it's very difficult to do business. And Arpita, I remember you mentioning that we are 85th in terms of the corruption index. When you look at the US, they are the 30th. We're actually saying we're not too bad. Is that the right statement to make? But still, it's something which we are far down the list, but then it's something which, okay, US is 30, we are 85th. But then the perception is there. What is really happening in terms of the change? I think there's more awareness. I mean, we are having conferences like this where we are talking about compliance, where we are talking about corruption. Of course, you had the big, uproar last year when a couple of years back, when there's so much of awareness on corruption. And people are starting to be conscious of it. In terms of businesses being able to manage corruption, it's still a challenge, it's not easy. But then it's changing. I definitely would say, I'm sure there are people around this room who would have challenges. I'm sorry, I didn't get your name. Jyoti, from? Okay, great. So Jyoti talked about how the compliance checklist needs to be part of the system. How much of the legal system helps that, right? I mean, under the Factories Act, I was just sharing with them before the session, it requires spittoons to be in a factory, right? And it requires a dehumidifier, windows, enough windows in a factory. Now, when that is a requirement, we said, okay, when we built the factory, we said we have a air-conditioned plant, so we don't need a dehumidifier. We have wash basins and washrooms across the factory. We don't need this. But then the inspector comes in and he says, these are not there. We have that as a checklist. We have a mitigation action plan. And he says, if you don't do it, pay me money. Then how do you handle it? Do you go in for it's a violation? So you have to compound it. You face the prosecution. But then what is the next step? Then you build a relationship with the authorities, with the government, and then build a perception within the government that our company, the organization, does not believe in paying money. And then you build up that relationship. Down the line, the intent or the expectation from the authorities definitely changes. Arpita was, just sharing an incident where she was sitting at an office, PF office for 3 years because there was expectation again. So there is a perception of corruption which is correct. And again, going back to that question of investing in business, I think it goes without saying, and I think that's a point that both Akhil and Mani have covered enough in terms of how business is also looking at all these aspects and investing in compliance. It's not that they are not, but of course we will need to, as general counsels or compliance officers, be an influencer. Bring about the change, bring about that mindset change in the board or in the management to bring about that change. Yes, Jyoti. You had something.
Under any of our statutory, any of our laws today, you look at it when the inspection authority comes to the site, or whether it's a factory or whichever is the premises which he comes for inspection. Basically, he asks for certain basic documents and information and things like that. So that's where our real test lies. In fact, our officers, if they are able to handle, I'm not talking about any other sense. I'm talking about just being courteous, just being very attentive to their questions,
Absolutely.
paying them due respect will actually help win half the battle there. Number one. Number two, it also goes by our previous conduct. Like you just gave me an example, like of course today the Factories Act still says that it has to be whitewashed. You need to maintain a whitewash register, right? These kind of things are still there, right? And then the floor area should not be crowded. Well, you might have a fantastic plan today to see that the floor area is all addressed, all those kind of things. But well, again, it depends on the conduct or previous conduct, how we have been in the past in terms of our approach to compliance. So the compliance authorities or the inspection authorities, if they have been seeing that change in seriousness, in our seriousness, our approach seriousness in our approach, definitely, they tone down. The kind of embarrassment or harassment you may face will be much, much lesser if you have a proven, kind of a record of, improvements in what you have been doing. At least I speak from my experience.
Yeah.
But if you have that, because they generally come with that perception or presumption or prejudice that you corporates don't care for us.
You're
Right?
absolutely right. And I think a lot of companies have set up systems at their reception which actually tells the security guards what to do. So call the correct person, get the correct person to meet and greet the official. There is nothing that can make a situation worse than not respecting the person who's come to visit your office. And I think everything starts from there. So unfortunately, we are a little pressed for time. I'll just take your question in a minute. I think to sum up this discussion, compliance is everyone's responsibility. It is ingrained. Being firm doesn't mean that you are not finding a solution. Being firm tells the other person that you will do things by the book. And that itself alleviates or takes you away from this perception of everything being corrupt. Yes, please go ahead.
I just wanted to add one observation to earlier, having a compliance culture in the organization, and I come from G, so it has a lot of family history of compliance, if I might add that. One of the things that I think was not really kind of mentioned here, which is important, is to have a great ombud system within the organization.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
A great ombud system.
Ombud system. Yeah.
When you have a great ombud system and you actually, the open reporting
Yeah.
is something that we in our organization kind of stress very heavily on.
Yeah.
And, the fear of retaliation factor.
Absolutely.
And you measure that to see as to what extent it was and how many people are more comfortable reporting concerns. Because if you, reporting of concerns is a great funnel to understand where your compliance is. You can have the best processes, and of course you have great audits. So while we have audits, internal auditors, as well as G has a worldwide audit system where they just kind of descend on you, just like regulatory people would come and they measure you on everything. And if there is a default there, it gets reported at the highest level globally. So you are under a lot of pressure to make sure that everything is running at a level. But I, in my all these years with GE, have observed, and I've always held this General Counsel and Compliance role together, has been that some of the processes going wrong or where there is a gap and where things fall through the cracks comes to you through open reporting. And if you encourage that, you realize that it could be anonymous, or sometimes people even come up and say who they are while reporting concerns. We've really been able to plug many issues through open reporting. So I think that's a huge mechanism. Of course, now with Dodd-Frank's in US and all of that, open reporting does become a very important part of compliance, culture, building it. And the other one that most of you did mention, but again, compliance is not only about the letter, it's about the spirit also. So you mentioned about walking the talk. And
Coming to the next question, which was basically how do you integrate it into culture and how do you make a business case for compliance?
Sure. Go ahead.
So I don't
So
think
I
we
would
have
just
too
like
much time.
to answer her question in just about a minute at the most. So I think spot on. In fact, as I was answering Jyoti, I did mention that I think the only two jobs which in my mind will remain with compliance, one is hotline and the other being the policy and the process and the evangelization. I don't think the third, there is any big third. There could be things like, revise your checklists once a year. But these are individual responsibilities. These are things which only we do, which others do. Nobody else will investigate, right? Only me and my team will do. So I can give you an example. We receive all kinds of complaints. Okay, we, as you rightly said, something for sexual harassment. Besides that, we get all kinds of concern, and it's our endeavor, and I can vow on that we have not seen a single case of retaliation being taken. We don't ensure that. And to me, that is a very big tone at the top, stance. If you maintain zero retaliation, you kill the fear of reporting. And by the way, more concerns don't mean more bad news, by the way. Just like more slips don't necessarily mean more accidents if you start reporting slips. Similarly, more concerns don't mean a bad company versus less concerns being a great company. It only means people are aware.
I remember a time 10 years back when we used to have to report the number of compliance complaints that have come per region.
And we still do.
Yeah.
We still do
But the
that.
view taken at that time was, oh, this unit had 400
Correct.
complaints and this unit had 10. So maybe the 10 is more
It's great.
robust
Yeah, yeah.
than the 400. But the mindset has changed.
Yeah.
That the 400 is probably better.
Probably they're more aware, they're more,
You
they're
have
more
generated
compliant,
more
Yes.
responsibility.
more conscious,
Absolutely, and that in fact goes to, Ombud system, the hotline, having an anonymous hotline system, no retaliation. I think those are definitely there, but what is more important is also the awareness, the training session that
absolutely.
you would give. When
Evangelism.
people get that knowledge that they are not going to be retaliated on, they're not, they know what is right, what is wrong. Of course, it's information, and they also know that many a times I've come across situations where employees would not even know that there's a hotline available for calling. Maybe that unit which just had 10 people just had a lack of awareness. So I think one of the important steps that the organization would need to take is more in terms of creating awareness, training programs where every employee is aware of. It could be through a e-learning module, it could be a classroom sessions, it could be any of those. It could be a mix of that. Many of the organization has a certification. I really don't know how much of knowledge is gained, but maybe a work group sessions could be done. Those are the things which would actually increase the reporting and encourage the open system.
Actually,
There is nothing that is a substitute for training. They just
Absolutely.
keep saying that
Absolutely.
sometimes you stop by saying that, okay, I've done the e-turret training, I've done a face-to-face training, I've done a certification, so okay, I stop for this year. In our organization, it is that you just can't do enough of it. Just keep on doing it day in, day out.
Absolutely.
It is by just what is being hit to the employee, what he's assimilating all the time. Over the passage of time, it becomes a part of your DNA.
And from a pragmatic point of view, as he said, it also helps the company.
Yes.
Establish that they have done enough. At the end of the day, let's face it, we need to protect the interests of the
No,
company.
of course, when you are
And
faced
then,
with certain
goes
regulatory
back to
issues,
that.
you
Yeah.
have to.
So you have trained all employees. So
have
we
to.
have a process where all 20,000 employees affirm, and affirmation is not I have read the code, I understand, tick. It's not that. Okay, there are 15 questions and he has to clear 12. If he doesn't, he takes the test again.
Yes, he takes
There are employees who have taken 57 tests to clear the 12.
the biggest
And
miss-
all of them have to clear,
the biggest
without
miss-
exception.
The biggest miss which I see in the Companies Act is there is a provision to set up a vigil mechanism for listed companies. But what about private companies? If I am doing a risk assessment, and I highlight some big risk, I am a compliance officer of the company. In a listed company, there is a vigil policy, there is a whistleblower protection. But what about the public companies and the small private companies. There are so many private companies. Why in law we could not have a visual mechanism for all companies where there is a requirement to have a robust compliance process?
Yes.
Thank you very much, panelists, for this discussion, and thank you for interacting with us. I think we are all very clear there's a huge case for business to invest in compliance. If you all have any questions, you can ask us independently after this session. So thank you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.